Right. We're going to try this. This might not go to plan, as has probably been mentioned in many Plymouth Argyle group chats over the last few days. Good evening. Well, actually, let's abolish the good evening. And welcome to another episode of the Green and White podcast brought to you by Argyle Live. Unfortunately, I cannot be the one to bring good news as we could prepare to draw the curtain on another football season. The Greens travelled to the capital. London was calling as Argyle headed to the Den to take on the ferocious Lions with their ringmaster Neil Harris in the home dugout. And unfortunately, it was not to be for Argyle. A pretty timid performance by all accounts, then leading to an 85th minute winner for Millwall to send Argyle to a crushing defeat, leaving everything all very perilous with just one game to go. Now, I'm going to start with a confession, Your Grace. I wasn't at the game yesterday. I was at Sandown Park enjoying a very nice hospitality day at the end of the jump season. And full disclosure here, I have not seen anything of Millwall versus Plymouth Argyle. So we've assembled a motley crew who are going to give me an in-depth, fantastic analysis of just where it all went wrong at the Den. We're going to go anti-clockwise here, and we're going to take a trip into the call centre. Adam, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can. You've been put through. Evening. It's I'm going to struggle to say anything here to lighten the mood, but hey, it's good to be with you.
Gaza, we're here. Don't worry. And so is Ben. How are you, mate?
I'm slightly envious of you that you've had a nice day at the races and not seen any of Argyle versus Millwall. To be honest, I think that was by far the best weekend spent out of the four of us here. Other than that, I'm looking forward to exercising the ghosts of this last game and looking forward to the last day of the season with trepidation.
Yes, I did not see any of Millwall Plymouth Argyle. I did, however, manage to see a lot of London and its transport network at a very early hour of this morning. But I don't really want to go over that ground too much. And last but not least, Mr. Olsop. It's been a while since we were on a podcast together.
Has it? Leicester, maybe? I can't remember.
I wasn't on Leicester. Aaron dropped me. Do you remember?
Oh, right. They'll blur into one at some point. Good to be on with you. That's right, because I was going to apologise for dropping beer over your trousers, which is a thing that I did. So I'll say sorry for that now. Before the Leicester game, not even the excuse of it being after the Leicester game. All good, thank you.
Excellent. David Knight asks, did any of them go? John, you did. Talk us through it.
Yeah. Well, I thought obviously a lot of young talent swarmed over every blade of grass of the pitch, and that was just the full-time pitch invasion. It was a really frustrating game. I'm probably not as negative on it as some. I don't think we were great. I'm certainly not going to claim that. But equally, I don't think we were terrible either. I think it was pretty much a nothing game. There wasn't really a lot in it for 90 minutes. We sort of had a spell in the second half where we didn't create much in the way of opportunities, which has obviously been a big problem for us in recent weeks. But Whittaker kind of nearly got through on goal and was tackled really, really well by one of their defenders. But we had a few corners in a row. Gibson sort of put a header over the bar from one of those and sort of looked like maybe we were going to try and get on the front foot and press for what would have been, obviously an all-important winner in the last 10 minutes. And instead, they've not really created a ton either all afternoon, although they did have, the better chances of the two teams. Mike Cooper's made some good saves. They put a ball into the back stick. Cooper, not ours, has outjumped Pleguezuelo, who had just been brought on for Ashley Phillips, a substitution that I'm sure we'll probably get into a bit later on. Won't do a Sam and preempt the host's questions. But and obviously it's kind of in real time, kind of just agonizingly looped over the keeper. You can see kind of I don't know, it was kind of a bated breath moment in the away end, right, as the ball just looped really high into the air, and you suddenly realise Cooper is not going to get a touch on it, and it kind of plops into the bottom corner. And I predicted last weekend that I think I literally predicted that we'd lose 1-0, but I certainly thought this might be how the game would go. Obviously, we know that they're a really well organized side who have been on a good run of form under Neil Harris, and obviously got their own safety as a result of that, clinched that last week. So I think everything I said after the Stoke game about this being an unfortunate fixture for us, in terms of bouncing straight back, was proved to be true. I think we could have done with a game that was going to be a lot more open, a lot more expansive, give us a lot more kind of space in key areas, and instead we had to go to a team that play, one of the kind of tightest styles of football in the league. That being said, and without wishing to disrespect them too much, you really could see they didn't have anything left to play for. I don't think it was the most high intensity performance from them, not impugning their professionalism, but obviously, once you've achieved your objective for the season and then you're kind of metaphorically on the beach, I think it's just hard to get up for, going into 50-50 challenges. There wasn't really much snap about their play. They were neat and tidy, again, well organized, but it's frustrating because I feel like if we had, pushed forward just a little bit more and shown just a little bit more bravery, we could have nicked it. But I'm not gonna sit here and say that we were terrible and totally outclassed. It was a very, very marginal game that ultimately has been decided by one marginal moment. And yeah, what it cost us, I guess we'll come on to that later.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a comment. David is very vigilant in the comments. He tells us it was Rotherham was the last time that me and John were together on a pod.
I don't think I was on that one, was I? Oh, who knows?
Oh,
Anyway, sorry to impugn your memory, David.
I'm sure that there was a pod in recent weeks where we have been together. Obviously, as you can tell, this is a pretty haphazard attempt by me to host the podcast this evening. So please do get your comments and questions in. We are going to come to them a little bit later on. We've got all the full-time thoughts and there are many Twitter questions to get through tonight. Adam, why don't you elaborate on what John said? John said it was nothing game and it was one moment that ultimately sealed it. Do you agree? Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I certainly tend to. I mean, there was very little in it, and we've lost it at the more or less the very end through that one moment. I think the main word is disappointed, because we've gone ultimately to a team who you could tell had nothing to play for. We knew they had nothing to play for. We knew they weren't the most technical, and we've gone and said, right, let's set up for a point, and we've not got one. And it's frustrating more than anything to know that we can or that we could have set up in even a slightly more attacking manner. Maybe just having 3 centre backs rather than the 4. Could have done so. It's just frustrating, and I know it's yeah, and that comment on screen is absolutely right. My day went downhill right after I had the breakfast with the senior greens, which is always terrific. But yeah, it was really bizarre, if anything, because we have heard from many people that attacking football at this club is non-negotiable, and we're always going to try and put ourselves on the front foot, particularly when there's so much on the line. And ultimately, if Ian Foster's Plymouth Argyle put in a performance like that, I imagine his head would be on a spike and paraded through the Barbican. So it's not terrific to know that we're still very much capable of putting in that sort of performance against, I'll stress it again, a team that had absolutely nothing to play for. I think ultimately that's what's annoyed me the most, because we've lost the game. You could absolutely argue that a point may have been fair. Well, we were unfortunate to lose the game, and possibly in the manner it happened. But at the same time, with results going the way we were, had we scored the goal rather than conceded it, we would now be sitting here celebrating safe. That's how pivotal that game was, and that to go into that and never really show indication that we're actually trying to win it, it's irked me. Possibly more than it should, considering everything that we've been through. But it's left me I know frustrated more than anything. Disappointed was the word I used. Annoyed is another. Yeah, I'm still. Look, I've had a day to digest it. I've had a coach trip back again, lovely from the senior greens, to digest it, and I'm still struggling to put it into words because it's just so insipid. It was so tense in the way that it really didn't necessarily need to be if we got ourselves on the front foot, and ultimately, the way it happened was a big disappointment in its own right, and then I preempt that we'll come on to that one as well. But yeah, it's going to take a few days. I'll obviously be up for it next week, and I think we all will. But right now, I'm just really deflated and, as I said, disappointed with how that's gone, and it was really strange. And those are the best words I can find at the moment.
And without wishing to be a bit of a green tinted spectacles wearer about all of this, I obviously had the benefit of watching through FOTMob yesterday with notifications coming through. There weren't many. And keeping an eye on results elsewhere in the ever changing table. It's obviously pretty clear from what everyone said, and not just the two guys here, but all over social media, the forums and things, that we set up for a point, and in the end, a point wouldn't have been a terrible result yesterday. And should we have gone with a little bit more of an attacking mentality, or is it just a case of the pressure's slightly getting to the group?
I think it's one of those decisions that you live or die by the results. If we'd kept the clean sheet and got the point, we'd be certainly looking a lot more healthy now. And even if especially if we'd gone and got the win, it didn't work. We ended up losing, so it looks silly. And more than that, I think although we have struggled to score of late, especially since Azaz went, and especially since JB's been injured, we've sort of lacked a lot of dynamism from midfield. We've probably been worse at defending than we have been at scoring. I don't know if maybe the clean sheet against Ipswich, against Leicester, maybe went to the coaching staff's head and thinking that we could hold out another clean sheet. But we've conceded an awful lot of goals this season, all throughout the season. So the idea of going to a team that's won 3 on the bounce, yes, they were newly safe, and so they weren't pounding around with the same sort of enthusiasm they would have been previously, but they also were playing with a bit of freedom and a bit of joy, happy to just have a kick around with no pressure. So you could see that, as has been said, they weren't necessarily snapping into everything. They weren't necessarily, they're a physical team and they weren't necessarily putting themselves about, but at the same time they were happy to sort of ping balls in, which rather than sort of the more expansive free flowing sort of stuff that you don't necessarily associate with Millwall. They were smacking the ball in and cheers memes. And that was ultimately our undoing. They're not necessarily a big crossing of the ball team per se, but they obviously highlighted, we could see they were getting results that way, and so it proved that one came off, and it was just a shame that it was when it was. I think that highlighted the substitution, which I think really needed to be made because Phillips was struggling. Could he have played on a bit longer? I don't know. It might have happened. The goal might have come after that, but I think it's the we're not good at keeping clean sheets. So why go there and set up to try and keep a clean sheet? Why change the personnel so much? Why completely adopt a different style of game plan? If it had worked, great. You'd say masterstroke. We all would, wouldn't we? We'd all say if it got the win, if we got the 1-0 win, we'd all been sat here saying great masterstroke, putting Edwards in the midfield, acting like an auxiliary centre back, yada yada yada. Great tactics. It all came off, and the opposite has happened. So we're saying the opposite. I don't necessarily think it was an awful decision, but I think once it was clear it wasn't working, there should have been changes sooner, and that's where I think the culpability lies. It's all well and good setting that system up and going for it, but I think it was evident that I would say half-assed, but a slightly disinterested Millwall team was still dominating possession and chances. There should have been changes sooner to try and either just completely block up or to put more attacking threat on the pitch. And neither of those things happened. It seemed a bit samey. We didn't make a change to the 70th minute or gone. I think that's where the culpability lies, not necessarily in the initial game plan, but I think in the lack of response to how the game was playing out, I think that's where I think we miss Schumacher's sort of in-game responses a bit. We feel the turgidity of the torpor of the sort of game plan going on because we were so used to that sort of dynamism from Schumacher maybe. But I think it was clear that things needed to change, and everyone in the crowd you could feel the away crowd was restless. Twitter was restless, but still nothing happened. I think that's where the questions need to be asked. It's all well and good going with a game plan, but if it doesn't work, you need a plan B, and that's what I feel like we were lacking.
Just to quickly push back a little bit, I don't necessarily I certainly don't disagree with everything you said, and I certainly agree with the stuff about not changing the game sooner. But I don't think we did set up to go and play for a draw. I think we set up to go and win the game. But I think it was a strategy that was reliant on us coming out the right side of one or two moments that kind of took as a given that the game would be very tight, and could go one goal either way, right? So like, I take the point definitely that is perhaps not the best approach that gets the best out of our players. I certainly take the point that if Ian Foster had set up like that, then there'd be a load of criticism, and rightly so. And yeah, we certainly didn't go there and set about them in the first 20 minutes and try and go 2 or 3-0 up and sort of kill the game off, in the cradle, as it were. But I really think the game plan was very clearly to keep it tight and then try and nick it late on. And I think we'll get onto the Pleggy for Phillips substitution, which turned out to be a mistake. But I think that the sort of impetus behind that was to bring on someone who could be a little bit more mobile and perhaps better on the ball going forward out of the centre-back positions. Not to say that I don't think Phillips is very good at those things at all. I think he actually had a pretty good game yesterday. But I think that change, when it was eventually made, was kind of minded to do that. I think bringing on Hardy for Wayne was also kind of done with that in mind, sort of give Wayne an hour or so and then bring Hardy on to kind of stretch the tired defense rather than watching him get tired first, which I think we've seen all too often in recent weeks. So I think there was a game plan there to go and win it. And I guess, to play devil's advocate, while it obviously hasn't worked in hindsight, you could also say that, now in 5 games under the caretaker managers, we've conceded 5 goals and scored 3, right? I think overall. And that return has got us 7 points. So obviously that's been a return that has been totally sort of dependent on keeping it tight at the back and then scoring 1 goal in a game. Now, again, I'm very open to the conversation about that not being the right way to approach things for our squad. But equally, I think it's hard to... I don't think it's just like saying, the Leicester game happened, so let's try and kind of change. Let's try and replicate that every single week. I mean, QPR also happened, and Rotherham also happened, and that was kind of much the same story. So I kind of understand why they would go about it that way. And I think, especially after last weekend, if we'd gone really gung ho, and it hadn't worked, and we'd been broken on twice, and they'd scored twice in the first 10-15 minutes, obviously everyone would be saying, well, that was a total disaster, and the game was lost after 10 minutes. So yeah, I'm certainly not going to, sit here and praise to the rafters the way that we managed the game, because it could, in many respects, have been a lot better. And obviously, in hindsight, it didn't work. But I don't think the idea was to go there and play for a draw. I think it was to win the game. I think that was fairly clear from the way that the sort of pattern of the game unfolded. But yes, obviously, it was reliant on us coming out the right side of a very marginal scoreline, and we didn't do that.
Adam, talk us through the changes to the starting lineup that Dewsnip and Nansville made for this one. 3 changes in all from the Stoke game.
Yeah, and I think it's just to perhaps to expand on what John said there. I completely accept that every team goes into a game with an idea of winning it, or at least they should, or they're in the wrong sport. What these changes did, and the reason there's a lot of playing for a point is, a couple of things. One, because it was pretty clear that going defensively would be the way we wanted to tackle the game, the way we put a Battler and Edwards in midfield, which didn't necessarily mind. The fact that we had the 4 centre-backs with Galloway playing a left wing-back, it was clear that the idea of us trying to win this game was to hold out, to try and nick a moment, and if we get a point, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. And I've seen a few comments on that saying that a point overall wouldn't have made a difference. I actually totally disagree. I think a point would have been absolutely fine from yesterday for a couple of reasons. One, because it would give us so many more options going into Hull. We would be in a situation with an extra point where drawing against Hull would be virtually certain to keep us safe had we drawn against Millwall. One, because it would require Blackburn to go and get something at Leicester, and two, because even if that did happen, Birmingham would have to score at least 5 goals against Norwich. So I don't necessarily think saying we're going to go here and a point wouldn't be the worst thing in the world is a bad thing, because it's absolutely would have been fine. Now those changes were made, or the changes and the players that came in on the back of that. I mean, you're looking at a few things. As I say, Edwards in midfield isn't necessarily one I hated as such. It was a bit left field, but I think looking
Well, I
at the
think it
way
was
that
Adam. I think it was enforced, right? That was what Nanskiville was suggesting in his post-match
Jordan
interview. That
Houghton was ill, wasn't he?
Houghton was ill and Forshaw was
unfortunately,
available.
yeah. I
but
mean, it's do you know what? I hadn't even seen that, but I guess it makes a lot of sense. I mean, regardless, even if it was by choice, I wouldn't have hated it anyway, for the simple reason that having a battler and having someone that can get themselves involved in duels in a midfield against Millwall, is probably a decent enough way to go about it. I mean, I tend to agree that Darko Jamie was a big miss in that sense, because even though he didn't win every duel he participated in, he would always put himself in the mix, get himself to into those situations, and ultimately could have given us maybe 1 or 2 more moments had he been available. But I didn't necessarily mind either way, enforced or not. Then there's the question of Ben Waine coming in up front for Hardy. Now, I think this is a kind of one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't moments, because if that was the other way round and Hardy played 60 minutes and Waine played 30, or however long it was, probably a bit longer than that, and exactly the same thing happened, which it may well have done. We know Hardy's been running on fumes. Then there'll be a conversation of, oh, why didn't you start Ben Waine? Why didn't you give us a chance to get Hardy off the bench, perhaps? Whereas now what we're looking at is saying, oh, well, couldn't we have started Hardy because as Waine didn't necessarily perform? I don't think Waine had his worst game, for what it's worth, but putting him in a situation where he's facing Jake Cooper and Japhet Tanganga for balls played up to him is it's asking for trouble, I think. So yeah, the changes. I think the changes when I saw them come in, as much as the first thing that we thought of was, well, it's a little bit weird. It was a little bit, I don't know, uninspiring. Maybe is how I describe it. And I think that kind of goes back to the point that we've all spoken about. There was no indication from that selection that we were going to try and outscore them or anything like that. It wasn't a case of, oh, we've picked this team because we want to get 3 goals. We don't necessarily care if you scored 2. Plymouth Argyle haven't been like that for a while. But to see it so explicitly, to see it in such a situation where you can absolutely tell that we're more than happy to spend our time soaking up pressure and hope to nick one on the break. Yeah, I keep harking back to the same point, but we're against a team with nothing to play for. Could there not have at least been something for us to hang our hat on in that team selection to go, oh, okay, well, we're trying to exploit them this way, or we're trying to do this, we're trying to play this part of the game on our terms because we know we're fighting for it and they're not. Yeah, I know this is something, hindsight's 2020, and if Ben Waine smashes it into the top corner on 20 minutes rather than smashing it into the stand, perhaps we're having a very different conversation. But yeah, it's just another one of those parts of the day as a whole that it left me uninspired and did not really fill me with much confidence, even though we know or we believe that at least some of those changes were enforced anyway. It was all a bit of a damp squib in the end for such an occasion, and I don't think those changes helped.
John, talk us through the goal that ultimately decided it, because there's been a lot of, to coin a Sam Down phrase, there's been a lot of hyperbole on social media about the substitution to take off Ashley Phillips and bring on Julio Pleguezuelo. Talk me through the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of mentioned it earlier. It's kind of a looping cross in from the right hand side, and then a very loopy header that's kind of, again, in real time, it was sort of agonizing to watch it go in. Obviously, the hyperbole, Sam would call it, that you're referring to, is about bringing off Phillips and putting on Pleguezuelo. Very clearly, Jake Cooper, I assume the tallest man on the pitch for them, must be close, if not, had a much better chance, let's say, of out jumping Pleguezuelo than he did about jumping Ashley Phillips, who is a lot taller. It's obviously not to say that goal wouldn't have been scored if Phillips had been on the pitch, but it would have given us a lot better chance of. Well, exactly. Yeah, didn't even need to jump. So it's. I think Cooper would have been capable of beating Phillips in an aerial duel, but Pleguezuelo, it was a big mismatch, wasn't it? Obviously, maybe there's an extent to which you can blame him. Obviously, you can't really blame him for his genes and the fact he's not taller, which was a key part of it. And then Cooper's positioning, I've seen some criticism of that. I don't know. I think it's. I'm not sure he was going to save it necessarily one way or another. Mike Cooper, that is. So, yeah, it's a really soft and frustrating goal to concede from an avenue that we had done quite well at shutting down for the rest of the game, and an avenue that we presumably always knew they were going to be dangerous at. And while I do agree with Adam's comments about the lineup being a little bit uninspiring, I think that some of the selections, particularly sort of shifting Galloway out to left wing back, did quite well at kind of nullifying that wide ball in the box threat. I think he's a very capable player who can play left wing back very well, but also kind of did have the dimension of also kind of it was kind of like we had four centre backs on the pitch, right? And I think that sort of worked quite well throughout the afternoon. But then, it's just one moment where either it's a lapse in concentration or it's just an aerial advantage that they happen to have. Poor positioning, you could possibly argue, from one or both of Pleguezuelo and Cooper, and ultimately it's been decisive. A very disappointing goal to concede.
I think with that goal, I've seen some. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just to say, I've seen some comments as like, is it poor management? Is it poor decision making? Not necessarily with the substitute in itself, because I think we'd all kind of seen Phillips going off and thinking, yeah, I can see why he's done this. Phillips is tiring. He's not having the best of times out there. So the substitution wasn't necessarily unsensible. The problem I have with the goal is that from minute one, for every set piece, be that a free kick, corner, even long throws, we knew the big centre backs would go up. That standard. What Millwall did from their first set piece is, as soon as the ball was cleared, would keep at least one of Cooper or of Tanganga up in the penalty area. Now, we would have seen that happening. We would have known that's happening. And even if we ended up in some sort of, let's call it, open play situation, we'd have known that's a threat that we had to combat, right? So is the fact that we've ended up with Pleguezuelo rather than, say, Dan Scar being on the man that's been left up there, is that an error of judgment? Is the fact that the game was coming to an end and they were tiring just meant that was a slight lapse? I'm not sure what happened, but I was really disappointed that something that Millwall had clearly put forward as a tactic that we'd seen from minute one, and that we've been able to deal with more or less, like you say, John, very well for the vast majority of the game, that we lapsed in that sort of way. I don't know what it was, whether it was tactical to say, well, Pleggy, he's your man, or whether it was a case of we really ought to have had a bit more concentration at the back and saying, no, we want Dan Scar to be on him at all times, even if he's staying upfield from what is an open play situation. I don't know the correct answer to that, but I was really disappointed with how that went in, and I think, like, as has been said, as the ball was looping up, there was a certain deflation and inevitability that it was going to settle in the bottom corner. So yeah, a bad moment, and one that I think was foreseeable and I think was preventable, if I'm honest, one way or another. But I don't necessarily think the substitution itself was the reason that went in, nor do I think we should be scolding Pleggy exactly for being 5'10". Admittedly, he could have jumped because Cooper didn't need to. But hey, that's another conversation.
Let's rattle through some full-time thoughts then before we come on to the questions tonight. Matt Lee says, I don't honestly believe there are three worse teams than us in the league. Rotherham, Huddersfield, and us are teams I've seen turn in the worst performances of the season. Also, you just know a Stansfield winner sends us down next week. It's fate. We've got Ryan says, actually thought we played okay. We went with physicality and it worked. Just needed to be better going forward. Felt we needed Forshaw on. Hardy made a huge difference. Could have gone either way. Birmingham don't beat Norwich. We stay up even if we lose, unless we concede 4 and they draw. Let's not think about that. Mike Charlick takes a different view on it. Smiles on faces. We've got our Argyle back. Do me a favour. If the dressing room ousts the manager, then they better step up. Sadly, they just aren't good enough. We've got pull back, lineup, performance, subs, timing of subs, hiring of head coach, January recruitment, timing of the sacking of the head coach, hiring of a firefighting manager, all honking, and we will probably go down because of this. I'm going back to bed. Wake me up for Burton away in August. Vince Rennie says, only way we stay up is if Norwich beat Birmingham. We have gone back to Fozzie ball and we were dreadful again. I can see us getting hammered next week. And let's try and pick out one more. Michael Sultan says, it looked like the game plan was going to pay off. Then we take off Phillips at 6'4" with 9 minutes of normal time left. Bring on Pleggy, 5'10". Result was immediately out jumped for the goal. Was this substitution essential? We have already obviously touched on that. Just very quickly, is there anything else anyone wants to add on Hull before we go into the questions? This will be a rare opportunity probably for Andy Davis to get off scot-free from a berating of Ref Watch, given I haven't watched the game, so I can't possibly comment, but I'm sure he had a shocker. Anybody got anything to add on Millwall?
Just on the referee quickly, I didn't notice him at all, so I'd say probably job well done in that sense. Fairly unobtrusive performance, I thought.
I would like to say quickly that, Adam was
just
talking
very quickly, Ben. I've
yeah.
just had a shiver go down my spine. Sorry, carry on.
So walking over your grave or whatever they say. I don't
No, it was somebody. It was somebody praising a referee on a green and white podcast. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, no, it was. I thought he was pretty good as well, to be fair. But then there wasn't really much. I think it was okay from Millwall to there not be much bite, but I thought we lacked bite, considering that we, are in the position we are in. That's the one thing I think that there was a sort of harrying around from Joe Edwards and stuff, but other than that, I thought we lacked bite. I think maybe it would have been, even if picked up a few more yellows, would have sat a bit nicer with the result at the end of the day. I just want to say that, with the changes and everything,
very very quickly, what's that Roy Keane meme? If I'm not having a great day, I'll look around and I'll just smash into somebody just to make me feel better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it would have made the rest of us feel a bit better too. I think it's exposed, like we've had, Forshaw's chronically injured, JB's out for the season. Devine was he's back now, available, but he was suspended, wasn't he? It just shows how thin the squad. I think there was a comment from Rosa earlier. It has, Schumacher, if you extrapolate the points that Schumacher had accrued over the season, I think we'd have been on target for 54 points, which isn't miles off where we are now. And we had Azaz and Kundal, KKH, who I think is a massively underrated, who added to the team, I think more than is credited for. We've now got a weaker squad than then. So we're probably performing about realistically where we ought to be. And we just don't have the depth of squad. We've let people go like Matt Butcher, even players like Tyreek Wright, who, might have been able to come in and give Morgan Whittaker sort of like 10, 20 minutes of break or whatever. I just feel like there's been a little bit of mismanagement of some of the players we've allowed to go, maybe, or haven't brought in bodies that might have. It's all well and like someone mentioned in the comments earlier that Ash Phillips hasn't played a full 90 minutes since I think his first game, perhaps. So I do feel like the January window could be, not that we were to know it was going to go as badly as it was. No one was brought in thinking it was going to go. They weren't going to perform, or they were going to get injured. But we certainly, I think, took a risk with some of the signings in January, and I think that might contribute quite heavily towards our downfall, because we were a thin squad to begin with, and to allow players to go out. I know Early got injured, but he could have stayed and been a body. We let Butcher go. I think there might. It's all, as Adam said, 2020 hindsight's great, but I think one of the biggest contributors to our performance yesterday and also sort of late has been a general accrual of tiredness and just weight in the legs from players who are having to go again and again and again in a league. Remember that most of them haven't ever played in, requiring levels that they've not ever had to dig to before. So I think the selection yesterday kind of speaks a bit to that as much as to any kind of being too clever in team selection, just to the fact that we're just so thin.
I wish I was so thin as our squad. Let's go into questions then, given we've got nothing else to touch on Millwall, and we've actually managed to get through 35 minutes with somebody. We've got 600 people watching tonight, so thank you very much. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, retweet, share, bookmark. I don't know what else social media accounts get you to do these days, but please do get involved. And we've managed to get through 35 minutes without anyone appearing in the comments and going Mill, which is quite an achievement. I'm going to start off.
You just froze there for a second, Joe. Say that again.
I can't blame the Wi-Fi on that one.
As I said to Sam down on the train yesterday, what's your favourite implement for storing pepper in at home?
I'm not doing it again.
Anyone else?
Let's go on to the questions.
Who's your favourite right back from England's 2002 World Cup squad? That's a different question.
And you're going to get permanently muted in a minute unless
who's your favourite utilitarian philosopher if you're not allowed to say Jeremy Bentham? Just do it again and I'll stop.
We don't need to.
There you go,
Rory's got involved. I'm going to ask the first question. I'm going to ask it of all three of you, really, and this isn't meant as a dig at you, Adam, but it was something that I mentioned to John and Ben in particular pre-Leicester when we had a gathering when John decided that my jeans weren't wet enough for the rest of the evening with the rain that had fallen earlier in the day. I mentioned that to expect against QPR and Rotherham after such a quick turnaround for Argyle to go back to the free-flowing attacking football just like that was always going to be a bit tricky. And I mentioned that perhaps after Leicester, when we had a clean week going into Stoke, and then a clean week going into Millwall, that perhaps then we would see the fruits of that labour and we would perhaps be able to go back to something like what we were exploiting over Christmas. That really hasn't happened, Adam, is it? And if anything, the last two performances, we've gone backwards, big time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, as I said at the very start, this is something that is probably, and certainly the last performance at Millwall, indistinguishable from Fozzie Ball, which is worrying in its own right. Now, I think it's one of those, to kind of link back actually to what Ben was saying, that all links back to the January window, and we don't have the squad, certainly at this point, to go back to playing exactly how we were or how we want to be. Ultimately replacing Finney-Snares with Alfie Devine is looking like a worse decision week on week. So it's it's an unfortunate one. Now, I don't think that necessarily means we have to go completely into our shell. I think I've been vocal enough on the way that the way I feel about how we set up, particularly for the last game. But it's but based on what's happened, particularly with the squad that we have available, and the fact that we've had some enforced changes, the fact that we've had to put out some lineups that don't necessarily, or don't at all, I shouldn't say necessarily, suit the way that we would all like to see us play. It's gone backwards. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I don't necessarily think. That Leicester performance itself was obviously actually in a very similar vein. We set up to defend them and get ourselves a golden break, and that time it worked. And take nothing away, doing that against a team that will probably be crowned champions in the next week or so is superb and exactly how a team that's playing like that should look to perform. But to then go ahead and kind of take a backward step against two teams that are at our end of the table, and particularly again Millwall, who had nothing to play for. Yeah, doesn't sit right. Doesn't sit right. And I think I know we're going to go on to it, so I won't say too much as to next weekend just yet. I think there's perhaps a saving grace in the sense that being at home, it's a very different occasion. We know this side has preferred being at home than away this season. Tuesday and Nancyville unbeaten at home at present. I know that's 1 win and 3 draws, but it's unbeaten, and that could be significant. So
And
perhaps
we'd
that's
take a
made a difference
draw.
as well.
So
Well, yeah. We'll see. But yeah, it's one of those where perhaps the fact that we've been on our travels for the last 2 has contributed to what you say, Joe. The fact that those performances have gone backwards, and I kind of hope it has, because it would be a better omen for the weekend. But it's regardless. I think I would all say it's not been very pleasant to see.
I think
Anything
as
to add,
well,
boys?
yeah, just quickly, that under Schumacher, the press started with Ryan Hardy, and I think even under Foster, that game against Cardiff, when he was sort of unplayable, that everything started with Hardy. He's not been well, has he? We've all commented on it. And when you haven't got him running the channels and doing the things that he does, creating the tempo for the rest of the team, there's not really much else to happen. Morgan Whittaker keeps dropping deep to try and pick up the ball, but then he's not where he needs to be for the 1-2 to sort of go. It just seems to be so much impetus is lost when Hardy's not at 100%, and that's what I thought Wayne's performance was really not very good. I'm not going to go in on him now, but it kind of had to be played. They needed, if with John, what was it, John or Adam? Someone made the point. Surely it's better to get 30 minutes out of him against a tired defence than him tire himself out for 60 minutes against a fresh defence. But there were other alternatives perhaps than that. But I feel like without Hardy, we're just not as dynamic. We just don't get that attacking. We're not quick enough. We're not. Well, I don't use the word dynamic again, but it's the right word. We don't transition as quickly as we need to get in behind teams to get the best out of players like Whittaker, who will cut inside or be able to get to the line. When the defense is back and in place, it's so much harder for him to get through the line. And that's our problem. We haven't got anyone else to replace Hardy who does the same job or does a similar job to a decent level. Without that sort of that trigger, our attacking football's kind of lost. People can't just, as good as Morgan Whittaker is, and I think Bundu had a good game yesterday for the large parts. As good as some of these players are, that it's a new level for them, isn't it? People talk about Callum Wright and other players, and yes, they've had good games. All of these players have had good games, but they're not going to do it consistently against championship defenses week in, week out until they've sort of established themselves at this level. So without that kind of systemic dynamism, without the sort of like it working for the team as a unit, players aren't just going to be able to conjure up individual bits of brilliance all the time, and that's really a shame, because you'd think that with the amount of rest that Hardy would have had, he'd been able to get back. So clearly it must be more than just general tiredness. It must be some kind of lingering, niggling injury or something that's just preventing him going at full pace, because I think that's really where we're losing out. I think that's sort of like the key that, or the cornerstone, or what do they call it, the keystone at the top of the arch, where if you take it out, everything falls down. I feel like he's that for the way we attack, really, and it has been all season. And the fact that we're now performing this way, I think really is a lot of it is on that.
John, anything to add? John? Come in, John. Or is it me gone?
No, I tell you what, I was expecting someone to be gone in this, and I didn't think it would be John.
It was me. Hello, I'm back. I think I'm back, but then I was just saying I think I'm back, and then I wasn't again. So maybe I am back now.
Anything, John? Anything to add before we lose you again?
Nope.
Excellent. Right, moving on. I have a load of comments to go through. Carl, I noticed your latest comment. I have seen your question. and it will be put to the panel very shortly. But I'm going to go to the social media questions first. Earlier on today, we gauged an opinion poll. No, we were not asking you whether or not you're going to be Tory or Labour in a few months' time. This is a much more exciting opinion poll. This is gauging your opinion as to whether Plymouth Argyle will be a championship club next season or not. So far, there is still 21 hours left to vote in this poll. We have had 260 votes, and I can reveal we have had 130 say we will stay up, and we will have 130 that have said we will go down. That helps nobody.
It's
So,
like Brexit.
on to the questions. On to the questions. Zach Brown asked, biggest question for Ben is, how do Argyle put a football into a net?
Well, since it was addressed to me, I suppose I should answer it personally. No, that's kind of what I just alluded to rather just a second ago. I think it's going to be a case of, well, let's look at Bundu's goal against Leicester. We didn't really threaten much in that game. It was poor defending and a really excellent finish, threaded between two defenders and it kissed in off the post. So, yeah, we should coordinate that at some point. For those who are listening on audio, you should go and check out 46 minutes in the comment that came up on the screen. Yeah, I think that we've been relying on individual brilliance to a certain point because it's not what, the system doesn't seem to be working. Against Millwall, it was quite clear we were trying to do certain things and it just wasn't happening. We're trying to get the ball out to Wayne. We were trying to put the balls in the channels. We're trying to play 1-2s around the midfield. Nothing seems to be working. So I feel like we've literally just got to try and limp over the line and hope that, we can try what we want on hold. We're not, if we haven't been able to do it in the past 2 weeks, I don't see us putting into play some new wizardry to sort of suddenly bypass Hull's pretty decent defence. I know they shipped 3 against Ipswich, but it is a pretty mean defence overall, and has improved as the season's gone on. And they'll be on, they'll have a point to prove, even if their chances are slim. They'll be going hell for leather. So I think there's no point really worrying about how we put the ball in the net for this last game of the season. We've got to try and hope for a bit of magic from someone and hope that Norwich can do us a favour, which, I know we can't rely on that, but I think that's what it's going to come down to, unfortunately. And then if we're talking about next season, it will all depend on what division we're in, what money's available, and who stays, who maybe agitates for a move, or etc. So I think that's really going to be a question for next season. I don't think there's any solution, any easily identifiable solutions or implementable solutions that we can sort of get done within a week. I mean, everyone has their favourites amongst the squad who might come in. Callum Wright, Freddie Osaka, I know there's been lots of calls for, and I wouldn't be against seeing one of those play. But then again, like the lineup that was selected for this past game, you live and die by those decisions. If you play Freddie Osaka and he gets skinned inside out, and someone gets in down the right, their right, and scores from that, and that's the 4th goal that sends us down or something, then we're like, why are you playing Osaka? Why not play whatever? So I don't think there's any clever trickery to be found to all of a sudden make us an attacking outfit again, sadly, for this last game.
Without trying to coin a phrase from Neil Warnock on that famous 2003 for Sheffield United documentary when he stood in the change room, I don't care if it comes off knob end in 90th minute. Just remember that for next week. Doesn't matter how it comes about. Let's go through some of the other questions.
Is Aaron going to be playing, is he?
We've already, to be fair, a lot of the Twitter questions that came in, we have already touched on. Do continue to get the comments and the questions in tonight to the live stream. Obviously, YouTube is the better place to go to, because while you're there, you can subscribe to the Argyle Live YouTube channel, and it will also give you a bigger box for your comment to appear in. And whilst I'm plugging many, many things to do with Argyle Live to the right-hand side of your screen, argyle.live/shop, for much Argyle paraphernalia as being sported by Adam and Ben. John has let the side down with his rather tame blue hoodie.
I wore my Adam Randall jumper so much in the week that it had to go in the wash. True story.
Well, there we go. Let's go into the YouTube questions that we've got, because there is one Twitter question that I'll come on to later. we've got some more comments coming in, just trying to see if there's anything worth showing. Right, who have we got? Let's go straight to Carl Barnard's question. Oh no, we'll come back to that later because that will be in the whole preview. We've got Mark Watson. It's not really a comment, but it's something I wanted to keep to one side. Thoughts of staying up from me. This sounds really bad, but think would rather go down than be at Rotherham next season.
Absolutely disagree on that, because we'll pocket so much money from staying up that it would. I'd quite happily go down next season if we just haven't been able to rebuild, because we need a massive overhaul. But much rather stay up and take that new Sky money, please and thank you.
Simon Wilkinson says, all I'll say is I'm happy only 3 teams get relegated, not 4. Is it Goodnight Vienna? We'll touch on the Goodnight Vienna a little bit later on. David Knight asks, has anyone got a spare ticket for Hull? David, I think your best bet for that is to look at the Argyle ticketing exchange on the club website. Mark Watson said, looking forward to the retain list more. I hate to tell you, Mark, but we do only have 3 players out of contract. So for once, this retain list could actually be quite boring. Unless we're exercising contract extensions in players' contracts, or whether anyone's triggered a extra clause. Marcus said, whatever happens, it's going to be a really busy summer. It is going to be a really busy summer. And before we touch on Argyle's busy summer, we will be doing that in a series of very special episodes throughout the off-season, starting literally 72 hours after the Hull game. We will have more on that next week. Aaron is going to plug it. If he's watching, he is going to plug it. We will be back with a very special live episode after the Hull game. So keep an eye out for that. Toby Gosling asked, is it quite concerning the last 2 weeks have gone back to Fosball? We touched on that a little bit earlier with Adam. Steve Riggs says 5 goals in the last 11 matches. Who's going to score the goals to keep us up? Well, I think we've touched on it, that we really need
Ashley Barnes.
Ashley Barnes. We've always been a fan of Barnesy on the podcast, so come on, do it for the boys, for King and Country.
Josh Sargent, if you're listening, Josh Sargent, I promise to never compare you to Rod and or Todd Flanders again in my group chats. If you can just do us a favor next weekend, please. I can't promise that no one else on the internet will do that, but I personally will swear for at least 3 months not to compare you to Rod or Todd Flanders if you can get the goals against Birmingham.
I think we first need to be begging David Wagner not to rest him.
Unfortunately, Carl, one of the live episodes is not a great big Argyle Life musical chairs with Sam down. Steve Watson, it's not really a question, but I thought I'd show it anyway. He's gone all out. He says Blackburn, Huddersfield and Rotherham will be the 3 to go. That would be quite the drop for Blackburn, but it's not inconceivable. Don't forget they do have Leicester City to play on the final day. We've already touched on Luke Hodges' question, why is Pleggy marking their biggest aerial threat anyway? Surely Scar marks him. Was it poor management? I think we sort of agree that perhaps it wasn't poor management. It was just a fait accompli, essentially, that unfortunately was just a recipe for disaster. So let's go on to Stevie Vaughan's question is interesting, John. Did Argyle have a contingency plan when Shuey left?
Well, they said they did, didn't they? Think Hallett came out, if I remember correctly, around that time and said, this is obviously something that was fairly foreseeable given our success, that some club would potentially want to come and poach our manager, and so we've identified a list of targets to that end, and I have no reason to doubt that is true. Obviously, the identities of the names on that list are going to depend on when the thing happens, right? Like it's all you could. All very well and good have a couple of names who would be very much in your favoured, let's get that person in as a manager contingency plan. But, if those people aren't available when the actual day comes when you have to exercise that plan, then you can't get them in. It's that simple. My view of the Foster appointment is not that it was this kind of panicked kind of, pluck something out of thin air and hope it sticks. Oh goodness, Shuey has left. What are we going to do now? Thing. I think it was following the template that has brought us success. Now, obviously, we've discussed this to death. I don't necessarily want to relitigate this, but I think very clearly, rightly or wrongly, that their thought process was last time we hired internally. This time we can't do that because all of the staff are going with Shuey to Stoke. In fact, it's possible. I don't know. I've literally no idea about this, but it's possible that Mark Hughes was a name on their contingency plan list, and perhaps it wasn't so certain that he would definitely leave if Shuey were to walk out. Obviously, we all know that when Ryan Lowe went to Preston, he tried to take Shuey with him, and Shuey said no and stayed put. So I think with Foster, I've always said I think it was in their opinion or from their viewpoint, the closest they were going to get to an internal hire. Given that we couldn't actually make one of those, right? It was someone who Dewsnip knew. It was someone who Dewsnip had a prior football relationship with. He was sort of a coach who hadn't managed professionally, sort of in the same mold as Shuey, but someone who they felt was exciting. And for all the reasons that, again, we've litigated over and over again on this podcast and in our group chats and in the pub, it didn't work. But I really think that the thought process that went into that Foster hire was quite clear. At least it seems clear to me. I don't think it was a kind of guess. I think the contingency plan was to do something like that. And to be honest, all other factors aside, 48 points at this stage of the season is probably what we were looking at to stay up. I'm pretty sure I've heard people around the club say that they felt it would be 46, 47 earlier in the season. We're actually above that. And obviously it's turned out to be not an insane number of points needed to stay up in the end, but a slightly more competitive relegation picture than I think we would all have envisioned back in December, January kind of time when Shuey left and we were looking for a replacement, right? I mean, I think I definitely said to people at the time, Foster probably has a bit of time to bed in here. We probably don't need to do quite as well in the second half of the season as we did in the first, because at that point, QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, both, I guess, were showing signs of life under new managers, but neither looked like they kind of cracked the code. I think, in fact, that both of those clubs, after having a new manager bounce, had kind of regressed a little bit into sort of middling form, which at that point wasn't going to be enough to keep them up. Turns out they both massively hit the jackpot by hiring outstanding young managers who no one in this country really knew anything about. And we very much did not do that. So I think this was the plan. I think for me, the question mark should be over whether it was a naive plan to execute halfway through a season in such an unforgiving league, as opposed to was there a contingency plan at all? And obviously that's a conversation we've had many times, and I'm sure we'll continue to have over the summer, regardless of what happens next. But I guess a bigger question for me now is, what's the contingency plan now going forward? Because it seems to me that it seems far less likely to me. I'm glad someone else's temporary residential curtains are coming in for hate, by the way. So thanks, Gazza, for that. It's been my Airbnb curtains. I still get reminded about
Gaz, in all fairness, there's nothing I can do about this particular hotel chain's curtains at such a late hour. So I can't even get their Wi-Fi to work properly, so let alone change the curtains.
But yeah, just to quickly finish the point, I think for me that it's probably less likely there's a contingency plan in place now, because I assume that when Foster came in, the thinking wasn't he will be sacked within a few months. I think the thinking will have very much been probably, even if we go down from here, he deserves time. He deserves the summer to rebuild. And I think either that thinking changed, or there wasn't really a fear that we would go down in any real sense, or, Foster just proved to be such a bad fit that a change was necessitated sooner because his position became untenable. So for me now, I think I'm going to be interested to see going forward, depending on what league we're in, who we get in and whether the Foster process has kind of convinced them they need to deviate from the, from the way they've been doing things up to now, whether they are going to be willing again to put their faith in a kind of untested but potentially exciting but potentially catastrophic Foster Shuey type appointment, or whether they're going to think, that didn't work out last time, we need something a bit different. And I think that's a conversation we're going to be having a lot in the next few weeks, so I'm not going to get into that now in too much detail. But for me, I think that is probably the more pressing question than was there a contingency plan post Shuey.
Might be a conversation that we have as the aforementioned special episode 72 hours after the Hull game. More on that next week. Couple of things coming in. Johnny Q asked, can anyone remember the last time a player was on loan at two clubs in the same season and they both got relegated? If only we had Sam down here. John Christopher Benson says, who's the third player out of contract? Thought it was only Galloway and Miller. You're forgetting Callum Burton, of course, is the third player whose deal expires in the summer. Stokey AJ obviously has nothing else to do with his Sunday night but watch a Plymouth Argyle live stream. So thanks for the support, Stokey. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on all of our pieces. We do enjoy the interaction with opposition fans. I do hope I can bookmark this comment for when we beat Stoke in September next year in the Championship. I just want, Adam, I'll give this one to you because I'm wary of the time and some of us have got a busy couple of days coming up. Just a
John
very
and Ben
quick,
talk too much.
just a quick answer to this one, really. It's a little bit off topic. Do you think Saxon Ali could come back and make an impact next season? I think he could do a job. Obviously, it's gutting that he went away and couldn't get game time at Wycombe, but it's a big pre-season for the lad, isn't it? Given he's going to have yet another manager to try and impress.
Yeah, and I think it's the age-old question actually with all players who have been out long term is how exactly they come back and whether they're able to push on. Because I think the double whammy with Early is not only has he spent the best part, or more or less the entirety of a season, out injured, he's also lost some significant years in his early development. You know, he's still, I believe, only 21. So to lose a year at that age could be really significant. Alternatively, he could pick up and it could be absolutely fine. He's played 90 minutes this season, and those were 90 good minutes away at Watford. So if he's able to reach those sorts of levels, um, sorry, Aaron's putting me off. He's not even here. How does he do it? Yeah, if he's able to reach those levels, again, no matter what division we're in, then he's still got a lot of time to push forward. But I wouldn't necessarily want to say that he's definitely going to do that for the simple reason that you can never tell how well a player is going to come back from such a series of serious injuries. So we live in hope. I liked what I saw from him this season, but ultimately what I saw from him this season was 90 minutes. So there's going to be a lot to prove, and I hope he can.
Yeah, fingers crossed that he gets a good pre-season. It sounds pretty positive that he's already back running on the grass, I think Nance or Juznik mentioned a week ago. So fingers crossed that he can go on and have a good pre-season. Obviously, you can see Aaron's in the comments. He can't be bothered to join us this evening or even co-produce the programme. He's too busy enjoying a weekend at a very famous resort, shall we say, in the east of England. No, the south of England, sorry. The south of England. So hopefully, all I'm going to say, please drink responsibly. Actually, I can't say that, can I, after my escapades last night? But please do try and drink responsibly. Josh says, this is on Hallett's head. With him in charge, we will never push forward. I would argue that we did push forward to win the league with 101 points just 12 months ago tomorrow. That brilliant day against Burton. So we are an hour and 2 minutes in. We have 826 people tuning in this evening. Let's go straight on to we got a load of questions coming about it. Let's just go through them. Rory says the last two performances have gone backwards. Callum Wright didn't start. Is that a coincidence? Carl Barnard says opinions on his Saka not getting game time. Should he start on Saturday? Luke Hodge says 3 at the back or 4-3-3 on Saturday. Thomas Smith says, do you think we should involve Saka in the game against Hull? He also says, should we go all-out attack against Hull? It is a huge game on Saturday. I think it would be wrong of anybody at the football clubs to try and play it down. Just when you, I know we've had big games on the final day of the season involving relegation. We had one just 5-6 years ago. This is different because there is a lot at stake on Saturday, and as I say, it would be wrong to play it down. 12:30 kickoff at Home Park. It will be a full house. I'm sure Hull will bring good numbers as they try and pursue an ambitious place in the playoffs. Gentlemen, what was it ABBA once sang? The winner takes it all. The loser has to fall.
I actually preferred their hit song, Mustafa Bundu, running down the wing.
Bundu.
Yeah. That ended with staying in the league, so that's how that one goes. Yeah.
Hull City, let's have it then. Who wants to take first dibs?
Mamma mia, here we go again. trying to get the 3 points that will keep us up. I don't, I've got to the point where we hoped Stoke was a blip, and then we kind of got the Millwall performance. I think with a bit of distance, we can sort of maybe accept the changes and the initial game plan a little better. I still fuming that changes weren't made sooner. But do we have any basis for confidence that we can go and do anything against Hull? Well, to be fair, we did against Leicester. Was that all down to Leicester being rubbish? I don't think so. So yeah, sorry, Rich, I wasn't quick enough for that. I think well, the club keeps saying about how important the fans are, etc., and it becomes a little bit of a cliche. But anyone who was there for the Leicester game, it really was a special night, and I do feel like
it made some of us cry, didn't it,
really,
John?
I had something in my eye.
it was very, very dusty in there. All the dust being kicked up with that activity. I think that it's really hard. You can't just produce atmosphere on demand, and I find these kind of demands from fans. We've all got to get behind the lads. It's like we can, but some nerves are a thing, and apathy is a thing, and so you kind of need sometimes something from the team. And I think a lot of people have sort of felt the last couple of games there hasn't been that bite. Like as you said, Joe, they're just go and kick someone just to make myself feel better. It's not really happened, and we maybe need a bit of that to get us going. But I think there is the potential for a really big atmosphere on. It's going to be sold out. It's going to be a lot of people who are half cut or more. A lot of people who are, got the Dutch courage going on, and those, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. So I think there's the potential for a real tinderbox atmosphere. Will that do what it did against Leicester? Well, we can't say, but we certainly are better at home this season than away, and a part of that is, the crowd. Part of that is the distance we are away. We've covered this ground. I'm not going to, to tread it again. But it's certainly much more hopeful having this game here than away. I think that's, I think that the home park and the fans, we've turned up, I feel, virtually every game, if not every game, home and away for the team. One last effort, and I think that it could maybe give them the impetus they need. Who knows? I certainly don't think the last two performances inspire confidence, but maybe, just maybe, the home advantage, and certainly we can go out as a fan base proud that we've sort of done our bit, for our championship season. If we can go there and bring the noise and back the team and sort of try and give them that extra bit of oomph. But do I see us realistically getting something on the balance of the form of the two teams? I think it'll be a big ask when they're, as John says, they've got something to play for.
Give me hope, Adam.
Oh well, I'll do what I can, because ultimately, if Norwich City win our game, it doesn't matter what we do. So hooray! Yeah. On the off chance that we might actually have to get something, then my opportunity to raise hope is a little trickier, because I think I'm kind of in a very similar situation to Ben, in the sense that if you're looking at this game objectively, and if you're looking at this game without any of the sideshow, without any of the circus that goes with it, then yeah, this whole team is very good. There's a squad together that frankly wouldn't look out of place if it was if this was a squad that, say, Leicester had pulled together. It's one that I think is genuinely excellent. It's got some fantastic individuals. And on normal day, they're going to cause us a lot of problems. Now, this isn't a normal day. This isn't, a run of the mill game for either side. And on the final day of the season, strange things happen. We see it happen all the time. So who knows? I'm kind of in the situation right now where, despite all the moaning that I've done about how we play, particularly with regards to the Millwall game, I'm not necessarily sure I'd make the wholesale changes that we're looking at, in terms of the formation, in terms of the style. I think we have to put our trust in it for this one game and this 90 minutes only. We did similar. I mean, 2018-19, we had a system under Derek Adams that was, yeah, I won't say the first word that came into my head. It was very bad. But we ended up going into the last game of that season, and Kevin Nanscoville made the right decision to stick with that system because it's what we know for that big game. And it wasn't the way it didn't turn out the way we wanted to, but we did win that game. So, and I take that Hull City are slightly stronger than Scunthorpe United 2018-19, but the point still stands. I think having that sort of continuity in this sort of game is the right thing to do, and I hope it's enough. I can only hope it's enough. I know it would be very easy and instinctively, I'm doing it myself, thinking it's not going to happen. It feels like the stars are aligning here. I mean, probably Hull drawing last night, ensuring that they've got something to play for. Norwich probably don't. It's the worst result for us, and you just think, it's all coming together, and it's all going to go pear shaped on the final day. But we've got 90 minutes to ensure that doesn't happen, and we can only hope. And yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed that it goes our way. And as I said at the very start of this spiel, if it doesn't, fingers crossed Norwich City. And again, if we get to the end and they have kept us up, I think it'd be really good to have. And I don't know if they exist, but someone like related to this podcast, maybe who's got like links to Norwich or something like that. I think that'd be a really useful thing to have at that time, just to celebrate. But such a guy doesn't seem to exist, so we'll probably have to pull somebody out in that circumstance.
Are you referring to my friendship with Delia Smith?
Of course, yeah. I knew there was someone. Yeah, stay up as a result of Norwich. Let's get Delia on.
John, I sort of feel like I've said this a few times this season when we've been previewing games. I sort of feel like with Hull that I actually sort of feel like if they don't get the playoffs, that it's been a minor underachievement for them because they really do have some wonderful players. I mean, Fabio Carvalho should be nowhere near this division, to be brutally honest with you. And I really do think they've got one of the best young English managers in the Football League. Whether or not they've got anything to play for, this is always going to be a tough way to end the season. Am I stupid to think that the prospect of coming down to Plymouth for a 12:30 kickoff on the final day of the season is not perhaps as inspiring as it would be if they were going to Middlesbrough for a 12:30 kickoff on the final day of the season, or a Leeds or somebody like that? Am I wrong to cling on to that sort of hope?
I don't know. I think it's a very difficult game to game out in that sense, and I think this has a lot to do with Hull and a lot to do with what you just mentioned, effectively, because it does kind of depend what Hull team turn up. If their players turn up and play to the full extent of their potential, I suspect we will lose because they are very, very good. As you said, Carvalho is an outstanding player for this level. Philogene is an outstanding player for this level. Delap is a handy striker for this level, if inconsistent. I think Greaves at the back got into the championship team of the season, if I'm not mistaken, or certainly was there or thereabouts. Yeah. So they've got some fantastic players, and just like I would say pretty much every single week this season, we're going to be outmatched man for man, pound for pound, quality for quality. However, football does not work like that. I don't want to paper over what have been some bad decisions that have been made this season, or say that our relegation was inevitable and sort of feel consigned to it. But we have got 48 points, which I think is actually a quite competitive total when all is said and done for a squad of our caliber, which I think in recent weeks has succumbed a little bit to gravity as much as anything else. But that does mean that we have punched above our weight on occasions this season. It does mean we've beaten sides that are about as good as Hull. And as you said, I think on paper, Hull should be higher in the league than they are, which means that they are just definitionally prone to having some off days. I mean, Norwich have 3 or 4 more points than Hull going into the final game, and we battered Norwich 6-2 at home park. And obviously it's a long season. Norwich have come into their own more towards the end of it, but I believe they were 6th in the league when they came down to home park, and we dispatched them. Actually, that was, I think, sort of an impetus for them to go on quite a poor run, as opposed to it coming right in the middle of a poor run. So. And then, of course, there's the Leicester game, which is a much more recent example. Even in this kind of rut that we find ourselves in, we were able to go toe to toe with the best team in this league. And yeah, okay, I think we did have to rely a little bit on them having an off day, just because I think, as I said with Hull, if those players had turned up and played to the full extent of their ability, we'd have lost that game. But that doesn't mean we were bad. It doesn't mean that the atmosphere wasn't justified. It doesn't mean that we didn't show heart and fight and no little quality to go toe to toe with them. So. we got to believe we can do it again. And I really, really think that we can. I don't think Hull are world beaters. I think they're much better than us on paper, but I think they wouldn't be fighting for a playoff spot on the final day if they had played to the full extent of their potential enough this season. They haven't. So there are reasons to be hopeful, I think, definitely. We also, went up to the KCOM or whatever it's called now, and got a very good point there in September, a game I was at, and we actually played really well that day. And probably, they had a few chances in injury time, which Conor Hazard did brilliantly to repel. So I guess saying that, maybe we deserve to win the game is a little bit inaccurate, maybe, but we had some really good opportunities as well ourselves. And I think Azaz hit the post, could have made it 2-0. Now, obviously, they've had a lot of turnover. We've had a lot of turnover. It's not exactly the same fixture, but we should take heart from that. We should take heart from the fact that the kind of bones of that squad and the bones of ours played a very kind of even competitive game on their turf. And obviously, as you mentioned, this time it's going to be them who are going to have to travel down for a lunchtime game. It's going to be our fans that are going to get the opportunity to make the atmosphere. And, it is possible that after a little new manager bounce under the caretakers, we've regressed to the kind of Foster vibes. It's possible. It's also possible that we've kind of regressed a bit more towards, how Shuey had us earlier in the season, in the sense that actually we've kind of become quite crap away from home, with the exception of beating literally the worst team in the league by a mile. And maybe we've become a bit more competitive at home. It's too small a sample size to really know, but I think that means there is at least some hope that maybe we've just regressed to being a very good team at home and a not so good one away, or at least a good team at home. Certainly the Leicester game would seem to indicate that. So I think we've got a real chance here. I really, really do. And also just the fact it's the final day, mad things happen on the final day. So yeah, I think we've got to keep the faith. It's not me saying that we will win, obviously. After some misconstrued cockiness on this, perceived cockiness on this podcast before, which actually wasn't, but there we go. I don't want to fall into that trap again. It's going to be a really tough game, I suspect, but we got to believe we can do it, and I think there are reasons to be hopeful. Joe seems to have an intruder.
All I can hear is womp, womp, womp. Let's go round the group.
Called if they have an on-site plumber, you should probably put a call in.
Let's go around the group then very quickly. Just rattle through your starting 11. Don't have to go into great depth as to why. Name your starting 11s. Ben first.
Oh, I think is that we're not quite sure who's fit. Like Forshaw was purportedly fit for this game, but for Millwall rather, but wasn't. If he's fit and available, I'd definitely start him in the middle with Randall. I mean, John's made a really good case for sort of sticking with the back three and going with what we know. I'd potentially have tried something a little more defensive and put Isaka and Bundu and Whittaker as a front three, with the former two sort of dropping in a little bit, but just trying to break with pace. Just put the three fastest guys we've got. Bundu maybe not explosive with pace, but he's got wonderful close control. I'd potentially try and do that, but John's made a good case of just not trying to be too clever. Do what we've been doing and try and. So I would probably go with. I would have said Plegwith-Walo, but yeah. I'll still go with Pleggy at right, centre back, Scar and Gibson as a back three. Do we want I'll put Mumba at wing back. I think he's good defensively. Sorinola, if he's fit, again, that's pending, I think. Midfielder Forshaw and Randall, and then front three, take your pick. I really would excuse me, I really would like to see Bundu or Whittaker through the middle. I know they're not great target men, but they seem fitter than Hardy to run the channel, and I just don't think this is a game to play Wayne. I think he had his chance to sort of stake a claim versus Millwall and was too lightweight. So I would change it up a little bit. Of course, you can react in game if it's just not working, but I think one of those two can can do something, can compete a little bit for the ball, and can run the channels with a bit more energy. Hardy's had. And again, you can always bring Wayne on, or even Hardy early doors if needs be. And then I'd bring Hardy on very early in the second half, depending on how things are going. But I really think that you could make a shout, you could make a claim for any of the attacking players we have to get some time either from the bench or in the starting lineup. But yeah, that's kind of how I would go if I wasn't being a little bit more shoey roulette style and maybe trying to push an extra player into midfield. But yeah, that's why not try Devine his natural position where he thinks he's an attacking midfielder / inside forward type player, and that's mostly what he's performed in for Tottenham youth teams and also for the England setups when he's played. So Devine sees himself as a more attacking midfielder, and that's where he sees himself. Port Vale fans said, when he was moved back, he wasn't doing great there. Was moved back, and he was good in midfield. And I think we've all agreed that he's got the tenacity and also the range of passing to perform well there. But I don't think he necessarily sees that as his natural position. It's certainly not the position he's played in up to this point in his career. So if he can, if he's happy to and he can do a job, I think he would have been put there by Nance and Jusnip already if they thought that he was the answer there. So yeah, I'd go Bundu up front, Whittaker on the right, and Isaka on the left, just to get some pace in the team. Everyone else can sit as deep as they want, and then we try and break.
Adam, quickly.
So not too different in the sense that I'm doing the same at the back with obviously Cooper in goal and the playing Scar and Gibson back three. I think there's a thought about Galloway. Obviously, I'm not necessarily sure how best to get him in the team. So off the top of my head, I haven't. Sorry, Brendan, but I'm sure he'll feature at some point regardless. I want Mumba as my left wing back because we know he likes it there. We know we've got a goal out of him very recently in that position. So why the hell not? Right back, I don't want to go into such a huge game without Joe Edwards playing. So I'm thinking him over Sorinola probably be the first change I'd make from Ben's. But again, Sorinola doesn't have the worst record, so I wouldn't be against it either. But I just fancy getting Edwards into that position is perhaps the safest option of the way I'd go. Midfield again is exactly the same in that I think Forshaw and Randall. I think having Randall in there, we could probably have an hour's worth of discussion on Adam Randall and his capabilities or otherwise at this level. But I think having him in midfield alongside Forshaw gives us the right dynamic for this particular game, what they'll offer. Up front, I don't want to galaxy braid it. I think I'm struggling over it because we know there's an issue with Hardy with it, niggling injury, was it long COVID? I don't know what's wrong, but there's clearly something wrong. But I can't not start him. I can't not play him for this game, and I think ultimately he's if he does play this game and he does do well enough, then he's frankly earned a month-long holiday at the expense of the club. So just 90 more minutes, Ryan. You can do it up front, and behind him, I've got Bundu and Whittaker. So I think that's only a couple of changes from Ben. So we're on a very similar page. Yeah, it's and again, I'm going back to a lot of what's been said about the style. Does it necessarily suit? Is it necessarily something that we think is going to inspire us? No, no, I don't. But it just goes back to the point before that I think making too many changes now would be perhaps a bigger mistake. So that's the team I'm going with, and I hope it's enough.
John, anything to add on the two boys' selections?
Yeah, I go slightly different, although I like aspects of what's been said by both. Obviously, Cooper in goal. I think Adam said Pleggy, Scar, Gibson as a back three, which I would go with. I would start Sorinola at right wing back and Galloway at left wing back. I think that the threat that they pose with wide kind of mazy attacking players means we're going to have to play kind of a back five at times. And I think Sorinola has impressed me. While I'm not hugely enamored of thinking he's the best player ever or anything like that, I think he's impressed me up against players who are quite mazy and technical in games where he's played, where that has been the case. And I just think Galloway is a very versatile player who on the defensive side of things will keep things tight while also offering an outlook going forward. And there's not really much point resting him at this stage. As long as he's fit to go, I think he should be in the team. I would then play Edwards in midfield. I agree that he should be in there, but I keep him in the position he was in against Millwall, to have that, the benefit of his heart and his character and his love for the club, but put it right in the middle of the pitch and therefore in a position where he's not totally vulnerable to Hull's pace going forward. Although I think I did see a comment suggesting that Edwards did well against Mavididi in the Leicester game at right wing back, and if he does start there, I'm certainly not going to be against that, but I would play him in centre mid. I would then play Forshaw if he's at all fit from the start, just to give us a kind of big game head in there, and also because I think he's capable of being a very creative kind of deep lying player. I think him and Edwards actually might be quite a good combination there together for a game of this magnitude. If he's not fit, then Randall, and I certainly would be liberal in terms of using substitutions in that midfield too. If if at halftime things aren't working, get Randall and/or Houghton in there. And I would then play Whittaker and Mumba in behind Hardy, go back to that. Well, it wasn't a front three at the time exactly, but go back to those three players who I think have been emblematic of so much of the good vibes and so much of the success that the club has had in the last 18 months, and just hope that between them they can sprinkle enough stardust and don't feel like they're having to kind of conserve themselves. That they can, as Adam suggested, just have one final push to do it with then the option to bring on Bundu, Callum Wright, even Wayne, if things aren't going well. In terms of the setup, because obviously I have kind of gone with the same system, I completely agree with Adam on this. I think we can all debate what the best formation is for this side. If we do try something different and new, I'm certainly not going to sort of write that off instinctively. But for me, I just think this is the time for trying to maximize and juice everything out of what you've got, even if what you've got is very imperfect. We have shown recently that we can do that with that system. I think I saw a question earlier as well, which is linked to this. Would you go all out attack? And I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Because a draw is really a useless result for us. I think I disagree with Ben, who said it would be a good result. I think either we will stay up because the other result goes our way, or we'll have to win. A draw won't. The draw just seems, the worst of all worlds. So, I think we should go out to definitely try and win the game. That being said, I think if we're too gung ho from minute one, it's all very well and good to say, well, this is what this team knows, etc., etc. But we also know that that was what they were good at when it was a slightly different configuration of players, when Azaz was there, when it was a different manager. And if you go 2-0 down because you're committing too many men up the pitch in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, then suddenly the conversation becomes not just needing Norwich to get a result against Birmingham, it's probably needing Norwich to beat Birmingham, because then we're worried about our own goal difference. And, we all have horrible memories of losing by a lot of goals at home on the last day of the season within the last 2 years. So, I think we need to be prudent in that sense, but I think we need to show more than we showed against Millwall, more than we showed against Stoke in terms of trying to be ruthless, play the game at our pace. I don't think we should, invite them to come down and sort of play their way and do last-ditch defending. But I think we need to be a little bit intelligent about it as well, and not go just too kind of suicidal right from the off.
Sorry, John. I was just quickly say that the one thing that does speak for all our attackers, we're not as clinical as we were at the start of the season. We were exceptionally clinical, and as we sort of predicted, that's dropped off. And we've seen, we had 5 chances against Millwall, and we just didn't. Whittaker was through, and if he had been in confident form, you'd expected him to take that early, but he wanted to take a few more paces, get close to the keeper, kind of try and make sure, and then got tackled back. So whereas we could rely perhaps on being defensive and just putting away 1 or 2 rare chances, it's probably more likely that if we do want to go for the win, we will have to go more attacking like you're suggesting.
Yeah, no, I think I'm certainly not. I don't think we should play for a draw. But then again, as discussed earlier, I don't think we did play for a draw yesterday. I think because we're at home, we should try and dictate the tempo. We should try and play on our terms. What we shouldn't do is go kamikaze. And to be fair, I don't think we did that even under Shuey. I wouldn't necessarily say that was how we approached games, although sometimes it kind of looked like it. Yeah. So that would be my lineup. But I can see the case for disagreeing with. Well, not all of the selections I've said. I find it a bit strange that you wouldn't have Hardy in from the start, Ben. Personally, it's probably the one that I feel there's just not really much point in keeping him in reserve for anything at this stage. And whatever he's got, he just needs to plow through it for 90 minutes. And as Adam said, he can, I'll personally chip in for the Ryan Hardy recuperation fund. But otherwise, I can see
him come on. I'd like to see him come on early in the second half against legs that have played a half. I think. Personally, I think we'd get, there is such a good defence, tiring him out against those centre backs who are quality for the first 45 minutes. I'd rather I'd rather try and see the first half out 0-0 and then give him 45 minutes against, legs that are already starting to tire, than sort of use him up in the first. It's more about trying to maximise. Is he going to be more effective for 45 minutes against tired legs or sort of 60, 70 minutes against fresh legs or legs that are tiring at the same rate? And that's kind of my reasoning on that. But obviously, I'm happy to disagree on that.
Yeah, I guess the counter. I mean, I don't hate that. I guess the counter argument would be that under Shuey, when we had those good home results, very often we would, certainly against teams who were sort of a higher station to us, thinking about Norwich and Sunderland in particular, we killed the game by half time, or more or less killed it by half time. Now, again, we were being very prolific and very clinical at that stage of the season to an extent that we're not now. But, I think we need to strike a balance between, again, not going suicidally gung-ho, but also not being really cagey and playing for a result that may or may not come. I think we need to try and find that happy medium, which is obviously something we've struggled with a lot in recent weeks. And so I think to that end, I'd rather have Hardy on from the start and try and, as you put it earlier, have the full kind of spectrum of sort of attacking talent that we have available to us from the start. And then if he's tired, then bring on maybe Bund or whoever for fresh legs, or push Whittaker through the centre. Ultimately, it's a crapshoot, isn't it? It's one game, it's a straight shootout, and I think that's probably going to be more important than sort of overthinking it in terms of the formation or the team selection or whatever. It's going to be about who turns up. It's going to be about the atmosphere. It's going to be about taking our chances. To football cliches, I'm sure having a field day with this, but it's really a cup final. With the possible benefit that we don't have to win it, but if Birmingham get a result, we do. Draw's not going to do it.
Let's round it off then. An hour and 32 we've been going tonight. Just under 1,000 people watching live. If you are joining us now, because we've had a big surge of numbers recently, and you have missed tonight's episode, it will be available on YouTube, Twitter, X after this, and also for the audio listeners, we very much value your support as well, and it will be out on your usual podcast platforms tomorrow. Very briefly from you all then, let's get some scores. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. Ben, the full-time score, Plymouth Argyle versus Norwich at Hull City is?
4-2 Plymouth Argyle.
Fucking hell. Adam?
2-0 Hull City, and we survive because Norwich and Birmingham draw.
John?
Yeah, I actually was going to say exactly the same as Adam. I do think we have reasons to be optimistic. I think we're going to turn up, and I think we're going to be competitive, and I think we're going to give it a really good go. But I also think they've got something to play for and a lot of quality as well. But probably the other result will go our way, and that's as far as I see it, that's a statement of fact, not being naive or saying obviously that Birmingham can't win that game. Just stands to reason that better teams will normally beat poorer ones, particularly a team in Norwich who have been just in unbelievable form. I think they've only lost 3 games in total since Christmas, right? So be a very bad time for them to lose a 4th. And I'm certainly not saying it can't happen. I'm certainly not saying that at all. But yeah, I guess if I'm a betting man, I'm thinking that maybe both of these games go to form, and that will be enough for us.
Stands to reason is going to be the title of the podcast when Jay Stansfield pops up with the 93rd minute winner, isn't it?
I wasn't even trying to do a pun on that. But yeah, But we know. I think we saw. I mean, Birmingham, even under Rooney, when they were absolutely terrible, and really, if we stay up, it's him we have to thank more than anyone else, or I guess their idiot owners for sacking Eustace, who was doing a perfectly fine job. But even then, when they came down to home park, I thought they were pretty good against us. They've got some lively players, including the aforementioned Mr. Stansfield, and they can hurt teams. And obviously, if Norwich are in the mindset of we basically booked our place in the playoffs, we don't really have anything to play for. Then yeah, absolutely, they could beat them. I certainly don't think it's like a totally unlikely outcome or anything, or sort of completely implausible or anything like that. I guess I just think that Birmingham have had a couple of gilt-edged chances to get themselves out of the mire with 2 away games against the 2 poorest sides in the league. Ultimately, I mean, that's pretty much definitive that is the case now. And they haven't taken them, failing to even beat Rotherham is. I mean, I know there's a home away form kind of question here, but I mean, even we with our absolutely terrible away form won at Rotherham. So, it's not a team that are necessarily in a rich vein of confidence, or look like they're playing particularly fluid attacking football. And also with Norwich, I mean, like, I get the narrative that they're, that they might be on the beach, but at the same time, like, they do have something to play for. They're not locked into. First of all, I mean, in theory, they could fall out of the playoffs, so that's exceedingly unlikely. But they'll want to finish 5th, I assume. If it were me, and I were them, I would probably want to face Southampton in the playoff semi-final over 2 legs on Southampton's current form than taking a gamble at whoever comes 3rd. Although obviously Norwich do, as we know, live rent-free in the heads of Ipswich Town, and if Ipswich finish 3rd, maybe they would want to play them in the semis. I don't know, but I think just on balance, I would want to play Southampton. I would want to finish as high at the league as I could to try and make that happen, and make West Brom, who are on shaky form themselves, play the team that miss out in the kind of 3-way promotion crapshoot. That would be my instruction to them. If I were David Wagner, I would not be saying go out and play like you're on the beach, or go out and play a weakened team. I'd want to go into the playoffs with momentum and give myself the best chance of a more favourable on paper fixture. So I think they do have something to play for, and I'm hoping that combined with Birmingham's kind of shaky recent form will be enough. But in terms of us, I struggle to see us getting it done just because I think Hull are very, very good. But I really hope that I'm wrong.
Excellent. That was I asked for quick, concise result predictions.
You should know that's pointless.
It took us 5 minutes to get 3 scores out of the panel. For what it's worth,
look, three scores in 5 minutes on Saturday would be great.
Because I have a platform to do this, I'm going to give my prediction, and I actually think there's a lot of panicking over nothing going on personally, and I actually do think that we might win this game.
Birmingham Twitter is salivating over this, Joe. The edit functions are being prepared.
I'm sure it is, and they can keep right on scrolling as they look through the League One table next year to find out where they're going, because I really do think that we're going to turn up for this. I know we haven't in recent weeks, but I think this is above all else, and there's going to be a lot coming out of the club between now and Saturday. We're going to be thrown a lot of promotional videos and messages from the players for everyone to get behind. So very quickly, we are going to be heading off in the next couple of minutes, but I'll quickly run you through the permutations that lie ahead on Saturday. It's quite simple, basically. Unless Birmingham better our result, we don't have to worry. Huddersfield are all but gone. It would take an almighty seismic change for them to get out of it. But Birmingham simply have to better our result. Obviously, if they do that, then there are permutations to fall into place with that, and we will be relegated. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Sheffield Wednesday and Blackburn aren't yet safe themselves. Sheffield Wednesday face the easier task of the two. They play Sunderland, who are in absolutely no form whatsoever and probably can't wait for the season to end. And Blackburn Rovers have a really tough game against Leicester City, who I'm sure aren't going to be taking their foot off the gas at the end of the season. So there's still potential for it all to change on the final day. It often does. There was a question came in earlier from the Crazy Pilgrim saying, let's hope the ref doesn't have an impact. Do we know who it is? No, we do not. We will find out tomorrow afternoon who has been appointed to the game. I suspect, given that there are connotations at both ends of the table, the EFL will be reaching for one of their safest pair of hands, whoever that may be. I don't think there are many. We may have to delve into the Premier League to find a referee for this one. But look, that's it. An hour and 40 minutes we've been going. We've discussed Millwall. We've discussed questions, full-time thoughts. We've given your predictions and the lineups for Saturday's game. And what a game it promises to be. 12:30 at Home Park. Hull City come to town. The winner does take it all. It's a 90-minute shootout with the prize at the end of it around £15 million from our point of view, or about £4 million if it goes wrong. Thank you to Adam, to Ben, to John. Thank you to the 1,000 of you who are currently watching live. It genuinely does take us aback that 1,000 of you choose to spend your Sunday evenings with us, but we really do enjoy it. Keep an eye out. As I mentioned earlier, we are back live next weekend. I can't remember if I'm hosting or Aaron's hosting, but one of us will be back here next Sunday. I mean, I won't be here. I'll be back in Plymouth next Sunday, but I won't be coming to you live from Milton Keynes. Indeed, I won't be coming to you live from Milton Keynes again for the foreseeable future, but we will be back next week. We then have a live episode scheduled for the midweek afterwards, regardless of the result in the Hull game. So do keep an eye out for that. Set your reminders. I think it's the Wednesday night. We're going live. There's a whole group of us, another plethora of your favourite green and white podcast panelists coming together to look ahead to the summer and beyond.
And me.
And John, yes, and John. And we might even manage to get a guest appearance out from Bognor Regis's new #1 fan, Sam Down. But that's it. Keep the faith. Say your prayers. Do your rosary beads. Do whatever you can between now and Saturday to get yourself ready. It is going to be a roller coaster of emotions. Trust me, there are going to be highs on Saturday afternoon. There may well be a low at one point, but I'm sure that come 3 o'clock, the city of Plymouth will be absolutely bouncing, as we will ensure our survival in the Championship. If we don't, then I'll probably step aside on Sunday night for somebody else because I won't be able to take the shame. But cheers to the lads for joining us. See you all next week when hopefully we're still a Championship club. Night all.
Night.